ideas, concepts, beliefs, history, and cultures of the world are vast and infinite. Perhaps the responsibilities, disappointments, and traumas of our lives dissipate our childlike curiosity. Nevertheless, curiosity is essential to growth, and in the words of Bob Dylan, he not busy born is busy dying. Although the dawn of the information age touted a new era in the exchange of ideas from far and wide, xenophobia and intolerance of different viewpoints is rampant in our discourse, whether at the individual or mass media level. The essence of curiosity is now busy dying in many ways rather than flourishing. Never mind that it killed the cat. All or nothing viewpoints have become pervasive, and curiosity and thought are dwindling at faster and faster rates of megabytes per second, which reminds me of a quote from Henri Poincaré that my mother shared with me decades ago. To doubt everything or to believe everything are two equally convenient solutions. Both dispense with the necessity of reflection. And of course, reflection is the chicken to curiosity's egg. This curse of curiosity has led me to pursue a broad range of careers, not out of boredom or frustration, but out of an ongoing passion to continue learning and have new experiences. As a result, I have done a lot of wandering around the world over the past few decades through my various career paths, family, and long-lasting relationships. What has struck me after many years of being described as a jet setter or a globetrotter is that the number of stamps in one's passport is at best a nominal reflection of a person's sense of adventure, open-mindedness, and curiosity. In fact, travel has not been spared by the clutches of rampant capitalist greed and hyper-consumerism. The end point of travel now does not seem to be seeing new landscapes, experiencing unfamiliar cultures, exchanging new viewpoints, and reinforcing how the commonalities that the geography and resources of this place we call planet Earth and the wonderful diversity and complexities of humankind have to offer make each of us realize that we are a part of a vast organism that warrants equal status for each of its components. It is in this spirit which has drawn me to how I am instead of where I am, here, there, everywhere, and in between, and to ideas instead of material things that I'm sharing with you some of the pictographs from my wanderings over the years, mostly through the lens of the Canon AE1 that I saved up to buy after graduating from the University of Michigan in 1987. Go Blue, we have a couple of Wolverines in the house. Hopefully the various adventures reflected within will be interpreted by you differently from how I did it at the time and how I do now, and will serve both as a stimulant to your own curiosity and an antidote to the growing disconnection between each other and the environment that we live in. So that's really the theme of the book in terms of curiosity and what my viewpoint is. And we have a display copy up front. There's copies available for sale. I'm happy to sign a copy of it. What is also very important in terms of, as an artist and a citizen of the world and an activist, is community. I just shared an article with my mother from the New York Times last week about the erosion of community and the breakup of connection with people and isolation and loneliness and social media kind of what we call the echo chamber. Rather than connecting, we're disconnecting more and more. So I included the final section of the book, which is a collection of photographs by friends and family that have inspired me, just to really emphasize that. What is creativity? What is sharing this? Is it me, fantastic photographer, look at my great work, yay for me? Or is it a broader thing of sharing and generosity and thoughts and communication? So I did kind of a tribute to all those friends and family and their wonderful photographs in the epilogue of the book, and wrote a brief essay on creativity, which I'll read you an excerpt from. But I see even faces in the crowd here who have some of their photos, including my niece Shireen. Two photos, a photo she took of her daughter in Togo while visiting her in-law, and another photo while she was in Russia. And then Amanda's photo, beautiful photo of this guy entitled Free Palestine. And also on that note, I would like to tip my hat to Sankofa and all the wonderful activities they've been doing regarding the tragedy of Gaza. I won't share anything other than deep sadness and anger and hope all in one in terms of the plight of the Palestinians. And as we speak, the harboring of a war criminal, and we're having our streets blocked off so this war criminal can roam around in our streets of DC. So anyway, that's the idea of the book. I'll briefly read this essay on creativity, and then welcome you to ask any questions about the book itself, and also have a look at the display. London is where I shifted career paths from corporate international lawyer for over 20 years to a student and eventually the profession of acting. Over the Atlantic, en route to New York City for my next move to pursue acting there in earnest, I imagined the idealized version of my new life in Manhattan, where the New York Knicks were world champions again, and my life was like a perpetual intellectual and creative Seinfeld episode. Sorry for the Seinfeld reference. He's decided to become a blatant Zionist now, but anyway, I do like his comedy, but it saddens me to see people that I admire creatively taking these really disgusting stands. Complete with late nights among my tight-knit group of fellow artists, laughing and chatting about philosophy, theater, world politics, and cooking, and of course with a rich and stimulating dating life. Well, that imaginary life did not exactly jump at me when I arrived. I was disappointed to find that the thriving bohemian artistic community that I was hoping to join had diminished long ago to a more solitary, vacuous, and corporate pursuit. Nevertheless, I persevered. If I was going to be an artist, I would immerse myself in the arts, film, theater, opera, ballet, museums, painting, novels, you name it. I also sought to be the change I wished to see in the world by attending colleagues' performances and exhibits regularly. Wherever a friend or acquaintance wanted to get some advice on whether to make a shift to an artistic pursuit as I had done, I was as supportive as I could be, no matter what, and expecting nothing in return. When a few friends took the bold step of writing their first screenplay and asked me for feedback, I would dive right in and do the same for the next draft and the next, and so on. I recall a colleague being surprised when I complimented his outstanding performance of a scene in a TV scene workshop at the Actors Union. I'm just not used to hearing compliments from my fellow actors. Why not? I replied. I also recall when another colleague who was auditioning for the same role in House of Cards found it refreshing that I shared with him what the casting director had asked for during my audition before it was his turn to audition. Also, I'm regularly told by crew members, hair, makeup, sound props, etc., on a TV or film set how it is unusual to see actors be so kind with them on the set as I had been with them. I never saw this as some noble act. We are all a part of the creative process and should make each other feel the sense of creative community, regardless of the perceived importance of our particular role in that process. It was this transition into my experience as a professional artist that made me realize what creativity is and is not, or at least should not be. Creativity is not a contest. Creativity is the essence of being a human being. Creativity is not a commodity. Creativity is generosity. Creativity is not a fixed pie that can only be eaten by a select few. Creativity is community. Creativity is not finite. Creativity is an equal opportunity employer. Creativity does not depend on the failure of others. Creativity depends on inspiration from others. I hope you get a chance to look at the book. It's a very personal project for me, my perspective, a lot of references to my family experiences, and hopefully it's an interesting and enlightening look at the world as I've kind of traveled it, and it's not meant to be comprehensive, but kind of the journey, the visual journey that I've experienced, and I'm very pleased to be able to share with all of you, and thank you again, Sankofa, for hosting this. If anybody'd like to buy a copy, they're available at the desk, and I'm happy to to sign it for you as well. Thank you very much. And now we're going to go to the flip side. Oh, do you have a question about the book?
No.
Okay. It's kind of a family affair for those of you. Amanda's that we just met with us, and for the two of you, everybody else here is family. We filled the place up, but thank you for joining. The flip side that I mentioned, we form our identity, we express ourselves the way we were raised in a community, and that. Unfortunately, there is another narrative, which is this is how you will be depicted in the mainstream media, particularly in the United States and Europe. You as a person of color, a person of a different religion, basically you as a non-white, non-Protestant, non-male. And unfortunately, this is something we've been confronting since our early days in Michigan growing up, and everybody else confronts it, but how to challenge it and how to change it and flip it on its head. Professor Garima said once that there's no excuse not to tell your own stories. I've taken that to heart with this book and with other films I've done. Tell your own stories. I give lectures about stereotypes at different forums, including back at University of Michigan. I get that question all the time. How do I make a movie that will sell in Hollywood? I say, don't. Tell your own story. Tell your own story. Tell your own story. So I experienced as an actor, you're excited, it's challenging, it's all this, but kept getting pushed into these roles that I've seen since I was young. I remember being in Michigan at the age of 6, hearing the song Ahab the Arab, the seductive Arab guy with his harem and all that, and all the different iterations of stereotypes of Arabs and others. I mean, we go back to the Jewish Shylock, the greedy, stingy, untrustworthy Jew, the drunken, belligerent Irish woman, or Irish cleaning lady, or the Irish policeman, the African-American hoodlum and gangster, the lazy Mexican bandito, etc., and how those get pushed on us and pushed on us and pushed on us. So I spent a couple other summers ago where the acting world wasn't too busy and wrote a detailed paper about the connection between stereotypes and foreign policy. Okay, because this my experience as an actor really I started to connect the dots. How can you begin to go and carpet bomb a country and rationalize the massacre of civilians consistently throughout history without some sort of narrative to steer that as a bit of your propaganda and your depiction as the other as lesser or worse? You need a storyline. You need a storyline to justify having Irish coming and they're rapists and they're coming to steal our jobs, and worst of all, they're Irish, is a quote I saw during the early 1900s about the Irish, and minimizing the victims, and again making that rational. How can you have a Secretary of State of the United States in 1996 speaking to Leslie Stahl on 60 Minutes, Madeleine Albright, being asked the question, well, Madam Secretary, according to UNICEF, 500,000 Iraqi children have died as a direct result of the sanctions against Iraq. Is the price worth it? Well, that's a tough question, Leslie. It's just a real tough question. It's hard to answer, but I would have to say yes, it is worth it. Am I insane? I mean, how do you fill in the blank? 500,000, what is it? Ants, cockroach, 500,000 puppies, 500,000 kittens, 500,000 Swedish babies, 500,000 Chinese babies, 500,000 Iraqi babies. How do you even hear something like that and not understand? So where does this come from? When you have a constant depiction of Arabs and Muslims, along with other cultures, as one-dimensional, as lesser than, perpetually being beaten into your head throughout the media, and still today. I've read many articles recently about how stereotypes are gone. The racist Mickey Rooney Chinese character is gone. The Mexican, and everybody's being depicted equally, and people are making their own film. Certainly there's progress, but my own experience, which I really think is just the most telling, even as of just last week, a role that was submitted to me, I don't know why it was submitted to me, my agent should know better, but David Mamet, a self-professed Zionist of the extreme kind, has a new feature film, the playwright David Mamet, for those of you who don't know. And I'm just going to read to you this character description. Just to give you, this is kind of what I call the straight, one-dimensional terrorist character, whereas there's no alteration, they're not even pretending. This is the pure filth of the Arab or Muslim character. I'll just read that to you. Javier, for some reason they called him Javier, but he's a rich oil sheik. Maybe that's giving some context or giving it some texture. Middle Eastern, 40s to 50s, refined and intelligent, wearing a fancy thobe and keffiyeh. Javier is an oil baron who hosts Parker at his compound to discuss a business deal. During Parker's stay, Javier showers him in lavish gifts and pleasures, including a very young girl, which makes Parker deeply uncomfortable. So he's an oil sheik wearing a keffiyeh and offering things to his children, but you get the idea. So that typical leery, seedy Arab character. Just one more, just for fun. Just the straight, I'm giving you examples of the straight, unadulterated. This is an HBO series directed by one of my favorite Italian directors, which I was thrilled when I heard they wanted me to audition and I read the dialogue. You may have seen it on HBO, it's called The New Pope. Lenny Bellard. I think it's fair to conclude that as far as our ideas of God go, neither of us has budged so much as an inch. The Caliph. I agree, and thus we will continue to blow ourselves up in places of Christian worship. Lenny, so what is it you want? Your total and unconditional surrender, followed immediately by your full withdrawal from public life, otherwise I will kill the children. So that's just a brutal, ruthless, one-dimensional art character. I can give you many more examples, but I'd like to jump onto this new technique. There's a dear colleague of mine named Professor Evelyn Sultani, who was, excuse me, at University of Michigan. Now she teaches Arab Studies at USC. Wrote an excellent book on the post 9/11 evolution of Arab and Muslim stereotypes. And the new tactic that Professor Sultani kind of highlights is this: we're not going to go one-dimensional. We're going to humanize them, but ultimately they're still terrorists. I just love it. It's just like, yeah. So here's just some example. It's like, oh, Abdul wants to destroy the world, but he's got a real soft spot for his little daughter, Amal. Okay. So here's the ones that, this is by Nicole Kidman, produced by Nicole Kidman. It's out, so maybe you've seen it, Lioness. These are, by the way, roles that I've never even thought of auditioning for. I don't care if you offer me $500,000. I will not, I did not become an artist to continue the demeaning of my people and other people. So here's the twist. Character portrayed as male, Middle Eastern, rags to riches, billionaire businessman with ties to terrorism. Well, at least they said it. They laid it out from the get-go. Building his own fortune by legitimate means before profiteering off the wars that destroy the Middle East. The U.S. Pentagon doesn't do that, and a $1 trillion industry. He's spent decades sort of. He rationalizes the death, destruction, and bloodshed his seedy business practically behind by doing it in the name of honor and love for his family, cherishing no one above his darling daughter. So we've humanized them. So what's your problem? They're not one-dimensional. They're people, but they are terrorists, and they are destructive and violent, and continue to be. Okay. Here's the one I was very excited about. This is Jack Ryan. This is a lead role in a new series I auditioned for in LA, and I didn't see the description. Sometimes they don't give you any details. It's top secret. But then I got this, as I said, down for the audition. Series regular, 40s, a Messianic Muslim whose parents were killed when he was a boy, a Sorbonne-educated financial genius. He's charismatic, a Lebanese JFK. I'm like, okay, we're so far so good, right? Oh wait, who wants to pave the way for his son to become the ruler of a united Muslim world? So we're back to that. So that's kind of the overall standard stereotype, which is either one-dimensional or we'll give them a sauce. The other one that I've noticed, and I hope this is helpful for all of you because it can be subtle, and I've just had first-hand experience on this, where these are all no-go kind of roles for me, and it narrows down to very limited stuff. But like I said, from Dr. Verima, make your own stuff. That's it. But it gets so narrow, it almost becomes like my dating life, where it's just, okay, she has to be from a good family, this smart, creative, and it becomes very narrow. But I am still working as an actor and happy to be doing that. But the other one is the quote-unquote, it's a different form of the balanced depiction of the Arab and Muslim, which is there's a good guy and a bad guy. So for example, the show FBI, there's the bad Arab terrorist guy, of course, but then there's the hardworking owner of the little bodega who's Arab, and he's helping the FBI. And in fact, on FBI, they have a Muslim regular on there. So those are the good Arabs. Those are the ones that are on our side fighting injustice and terrorism. The problem, again, is the context is terrorism. The context is not architecture. The context is not medicine. It's not the other trillions of subjects that can be involved in Arabs and Muslims and other cultures of the world. We're going to define you in this box. And so that's another technique to be aware of. There's also the technique of what I call rewriting history through film. And one in particular, this was one where I actually was offered 100,000 British sterling, which was even more than dollars back then, to play Saddam Hussein's sons in The Devil's Double. I don't have any problem depicting a bad guy. I actually think I do it quite well and enjoy it. But when you have a film that shows you nothing about the U.S. support of the CIA in installing Saddam Hussein, his background, and the ugliness of the invasion of Iraq and the brutality, the example I gave you of murdering and starving hundreds of thousands of children. But you have this movie that is fine, these people are ugly, brutal dictators, the U.S. comes flying in to save them, and then all the Iraqis go around the square chanting USA, USA, USA. Gross distortion of the reality, which again will not be a part of. Finally, next to finally, false equivalence. And this one's a little more subtle. I don't know if you all are familiar with the productions. They were actually movies as well as Broadway plays. The Band's Visit and Oslo. Quick one-liner on the Band's Visit. Basically, this Egyptian musical band is going to the occupied territories to give a performance for Palestinians. They take a wrong turn, they end up on a kibbutz. Oh, well, wow. All of a sudden they start chatting. Oh, you have eyelashes, I have eyelashes. Oh, your daughter plays the violin. Oh, we're just human, why can't we just get along? We're not going to mention the occupation and the brutality that we speak of just 10 minutes ago. I can assure you some civilian was murdered by the so-called Israeli Defense Forces. We can't talk about that. As long as we sanitize the context entirely, it just becomes a human story. No mention of anything having to do with the occupation, the illegality, or anything. So it's just human love. Why can't we just get along? I can tell you how we can get along. Stop occupying my people. Stop oppressing my people. Stop murdering my people. The other one was Oslo. Was based on the negotiations of the so-called peace accords that resulted from the Oslo negotiations between Palestine and Israel. And there's a quote there, I'm just going to share this one because it's so ridiculous. The Palestinian delegation and the Israeli delegation, and they're having arguments, of course, and it's all heated. And let's see if I can find this here. Here it is. Just 1 second, sorry. And of course, the Norwegian diplomat is trying to get them to talk. Oh God, I can't find it. I'm sorry. Just 1 second. There's one more try. No, I'm not finding it. Sorry. Basically, you two get in there. You four, 2 Israelis, 2 Belgians. You go in there. Outside there, you talk about your families, and you know, you have a couple whiskeys, and you know, just bond together, and we're going to make this happen. It's just, again, the human level. We decontextualize everything. Those are 2 rules I didn't pursue. Is it black and white? Is it the ugly Arab stereotype like the first example I gave you from David Mamet? No. However, I think it's extremely dangerous to be a part of these types of productions where you've decontextualized everything, you've stripped everything. And yeah, I know these aren't documentaries, but it's grossly misleading. In fact, even maybe more misleading than just an outright lie, because you're giving the illusion that you're presenting this personal story, but you've stripped it of the entire ugly, illegal, unjust context. Finally, even more, let's say, of a gray zone, not for me really, but I've had a long discussion with my mother about this. The Kite Runner. Maybe you're familiar with this one. It's a novel by Khaled Hosseini, well written, basically about an Afghan family fleeing the Russian invasion. And it's idealized safe haven in San Francisco, America, the promised land. I'm not a fan of that kind of a narrative, but I was asked to audition for the lead roles of the Kite Runner, the play on Broadway, just before COVID. And it just made me wonder, didn't the United States just withdraw from Afghanistan? Didn't they occupy it for 20 years? Didn't they devastate and decimate the entire civil society and of the Afghani people? And didn't they just decimate any kind of hope for any independence for the Afghani people? Why is it now that they're bringing this play out to point at the bad Taliban, the bad Russians, and after this junket, this multi-trillion dollar junket, just free for all, with our taxpayer dollars, to go and just decimate this country? Again, no. Looking at the context is very important, and I'm proud to say that I don't do a lot of work in those kinds of projects. I don't do any actually, but if you want to make it, I've heard 2 people in my life say this, and I won't say who they are, but I've always wondered about this statement, which is you've got to work within the system to change it. Always makes my skin crawl when somebody tells me that. So be very careful. And again, back to Professor Green who saw it. We have to tell our own stories, and this is what's critical. So that's really the idea of stereotypes. And then I have a special guest here with, she's not here.
She went to the bathroom.
Oh, okay. My mother, I've spoken about the influence of my parents just in the book and the inspiration. There's another person I'll briefly share with you that's touched my heart, and the importance of providing support, and you can call it mentorship, you can call it role model. It's much bigger than that, of really finding people in your community and to support them as best you can, having an impact on their lives. I'm now 58 years old, and I just attended the 70th anniversary, if you can believe it, of my second grade teacher, who was a lovely teacher and has had an impact on me in my life. She's from Alabama, married her childhood sweetheart, they marched, they were civil rights activists. I was very lucky in elementary school in Michigan. She was the first African American teacher. I was lucky to walk in that day with my mom and find this gorgeous, eloquent, proud, dignified woman as my teacher, and how that impacted me, and how she taught me to stand up for what I have to, what I believe in, and the confidence of not having a racist teacher like my sister wanted it, and being pushed down, and sticking together, and telling those stories, and dispelling all this nonsense. So, mommy, my mother is here, Professor Sohair Morsi, who really, I mentioned her inspiration about my book. It was the inspiration from my father and my siblings and all my loved ones, some of whom are here. And the support, like I said, of Amanda, the designer, really made her, and honestly, Amanda, it was really a find to work with you and get to know you. But the idea for us to further discuss, my mother is a medical anthropologist. She received her bachelor's degree from Florida State University in bacteriology at the age of 18 while pregnant with this woman back here and his sister Gigi, and received her master's and PhD at Michigan State University in anthropology, and actually wrote a detailed paper about the Arab stereotypes in the context of the whole oil embargo and the oil crisis of the 70s in the United States. The picture of Arabs as sleazy, oil sheiks, greedy, the same narrative that you're all probably familiar with. But my mother, we really touch on stereotypes, but we're really talking about identity and how we challenge these formulations of our identity that's kind of against our will. So I'll invite my mom to join us and say a few words about identity. And I think you have a poem you'd like to share with us at the beginning too. And then for people, it's not meant to be a lecture. We're going to have an open discussion and back and forth with questions, any thoughts anybody wants to share. But this is really the context. Mike, do you have that? You want to stand? Yeah. Oh. Okay, great. We're going to show it after this. Sorry, just to clarify, this is Dr. Sohair Morsi. Going to say a few words about identity. And then we're going to show a film. Unfortunately, the director and writer could not join us today. His name is Vishwas, an Indian American actor and filmmaker. He sends his regards. And I'm going to share the movie. I think it describes itself. It kind of goes to really taking the story of the terrorist and flipping it on its head, which is an effective technique among many others. Okay, I'll pass it on to Dr. Sohair Morsi.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. When I think of Sankofa, there is a number of words of wisdom from Professor Gariba that always cross my mind. And that is, say your story. So we can sit here and complain about stereotypes and forever. But the point is, sometimes we tend to be consumed in the act of countering these stereotypes. And what really matters, which is how we perceive ourselves, is just lost. The encounters here at Sankofa provide us with the opportunity of hearing stories of people in our DC community. Some of these stories have been presented in the form of most inspiring artistic expressions, which I will certainly not try in any way to emulate. But instead, if we have time, I would like to share with you a poem by the late June Jordan, whom I had the pleasure of meeting when both Ashraf, my husband here, and myself were visiting professors at UC Berkeley at the time of the sanctions on Iran. Amr has already eloquently provided the background for me to proceed with the few words that I have to say today. But before doing that, I want to express our great gratitude to Sankofa for including us in its urgently needed project of forging solidarity, because that is what the Sankofa project has and continues to do to this day. Not unlike the early 1930s, today we live in a time when, as Antonio Gramsci put it, the old world is dying and the new world struggles to be born. Last Thursday, our beloved Washington, D.C. witnessed an illustration of this struggle as members of our Congress shamelessly proceeded to provide life support for a dying world order of power asymmetry, exploitation, dehumanization, and genocidal violence. This, in contrast to the actions of thousands of Americans of different self-defined ancestral identities, African, Asian, European, take your pick. All these people came to protest the presence of a war criminal in our city, thereby assisting in the difficult birth of a new world of peace based on justice for all. Facilitating this difficult birth requires nothing less than solidarity based on clarity of purpose, commitment to a protracted process of struggle. It is not simply a matter of showing up at a demonstration. This is long term. And as history has taught us, to have willingness to pay the price, whether that is enduring the sting of pepper spray in the eyes, risking arrest, losing one's job, or being assigned the labor of an unpatriotic, or worse still, terrorist sympathizer, or agent of a foreign government. These days, Iran is the favorite. This while Jamal Bowen loses his congressional seat thanks to the relentless efforts of the AIPAC Bank of our plutocracy. Yes, we do have a democracy, the best democracy that money can buy. the demeaning of US citizens exercising a constitutional right happened when an official of a foreign entity was being embraced by the majority of the people's representative, who cheered him on and gave him over 50 standing ovations. Those people were no doubt primed by the ever-present stereotypes that had long served as justification, as Amr has talked about, justification for dehumanization of the enemy of the day, be they Vietnamese, Cuban, Iraqi, Venezuelan, Syrian, Black Panthers, or Egyptian, like Nasser, who was labeled Hitler of the Nile. On Thursday, Netanyahu contributed to the lexicon of stereotypes by describing his neighborhood not as a venue of clash of civilizations, as he put it, but one of the clash between barbarism and civilization. Accordingly, civilization has been claimed as property of his genocidal regime. Contrast this with how Gideon Levy, who is an Israeli journalist writing in Haaretz, okay, that is an Israeli newspaper. Gideon Levy presented Netanyahu as someone who represents the majority of Israelis, who, according to Gideon, have lost their humanity. This is very important. What we find is the emphasis on Netanyahu. Oh, Netanyahu is not listening to President Biden, who has, called for a ceasefire. Netanyahu is not doing. No, Netanyahu is not alone. Netanyahu is the real representative of the Zionist project in Palestine. That is who he is. You take out Netanyahu, it's the same, still the same Zionist project. Okay. And this tendency of identifying an individual as responsible for many horrors of the world, is not new to the US scene. We always hear about the lone gunman who assassinated President Kennedy, or the lone young man, who attempted an assassination on President Trump, okay? But what we do not talk about is the structure of power and the structure of violence which produces these people, okay? If they are indeed, in the case of Wallace, specifically, if they were in fact the perpetrators of the crime of attempted murder. Okay. Now, let's not also forget that the entity of which Netanyahu is a representative was created to rid anti-Semitic Europe, not anti-Semitic Palestinians, anti-Semitic Europe, to rid it of its Jewish population, with the long-term goal of having it serve the interest of imperialism in the so-called Middle East. As one British colonialist justified the creation of this entity, he described its utility as similar to Ulster in Ireland, and as a shield from the sea of hostile Arab population, now referring to us as Middle Eastern or Abrahamic. All of a sudden, we are three Abraham. Whenever I hear any reference to Abraham, I must say I recall what Woody Allen said about him, which I think some of you may have heard before. Okay. But isn't it amazing, actually, how others have the audacity to define our identity? In addition to the familiar derogatory labels they assign to us, they affix to us identities such as Middle Easterner, or Francophone, or Anglophone Africans, or people of color. This being the polite way of referring to us, instead of using the term nigger or sand nigger, which of course continues to be used in private circles and sometimes in public, for those who are at least honest enough with themselves to do so. Labels based on the concentration of melanin essentially strip us of our historical legacies, which predate European ascendancy to power on the global scene. We are not a color. As an Egyptian American woman of Arab/African descent, I am the heiress of a historical legacy which I carry with pride, while having the moral courage to recognize its shortcomings, past and present. And here I have to say, if we are honest with ourselves, and if we love the countries to which we belong, we have to be truthful. And my grandchildren will hear from me now what I always remind them of. In the Arabic language, the words for truth and the word and friendship have the same root. So when you love somebody, or when you are a friend to somebody, you have to be truthful. We do speak truth to power, but we also have to be self-critical, something which seems to be passé in these days, but I do recall at the end of every meeting when I was a graduate student in Michigan State, okay, we always had comments which were self-critical. And at the time, my husband, who was a faculty member, was a professor of chemistry at Michigan State, would be subjected to the same kind of criticism by any young kid, freshman, who was a member of the Organization of Arab Students. Okay? So I have no problem recognizing that Egyptians can be very opportunistic in defining their identity as African when it is convenient, right? When they are filling out applications for their kids to go to university. All of a sudden, Africa comes because of the city, diversity, inclusion, blah, blah, blah. Okay? That is true. But Egyptians are not alone in this selective recognition of identity. We saw on exhibit in the US Congress a few days ago, Mr. Netanyahu brought with him an Arab Bedouin, okay? Dark-skinned, and introduced him as a member of the IDF and praised his heroic deeds in the fight for Israel. Right. And if you notice now, many of the pictures that we see of Israeli IDF people have people with darker skins, okay? Which tells us nothing about the fact that Ethiopian immigrants to Israel, Jewish, I mean, they're Jews, okay? When they, contributed to a blood drive, the blood that was collected from them was dumped. It would not go to a Jew of European descent. Okay, so when we talk about identity and so on, let us not forget how it can empower us, but also how it can be expression of something other than dignity and humanity. Last Thursday, as the world watched what an Arabic source described as the American circus in Congress, people mocked American democracy. People around the world are having a big, big life. Yes, the world is absolutely appalled by this form of democracy about which the former Western colonizers and the present-day agents of imperialism preach and use as justification for the dissemination of the lives of human beings around the world. These agents include so-called feminists, so-called human rights activists, government-financed so-called NGOs whose agents are intent on saving us from ourselves in the barbaric Arab world and the shitholes of our African homeland. Meanwhile, people around the world are also continuing to do what is possible and sometimes the seemingly impossible as we collectively try to leave for future generations a better world of real equality and human dignity, not the abstract slogans of diversity, equity, and inclusion, or Black Lives Matter. Oh, really? They do? Okay. Or Palestinians have human rights too. Really? I didn't know. Thank you for sharing. Yes, we each do what we can. As the Arabic saying goes, and this is a very rough translation, it is not a religious statement, but here goes. If someone among you sees an objectionable act, he, and I would add, or she, should change it with the hand. If unable to, then with the tongue, and if unable, then with the heart. And this is the weakest form of being faithful to a cause. Now, Harr has already addressed the issue of stereotype very well, says his mother. And the film which we are about to see is a great illustration of this concept's practical implications. All that remains for me to do is make some additional comments about stereotypes in relation to identity and, time permitting, share related personal experiences. But more importantly, I look forward to our collective discussion in the remaining part of our meeting. Now, before the evolution of my personal sense of identity, a few words about the concept itself. Multidimensional social identities, whether self-defined or ascribed to us, are not absolute. They are relative and situational, and of course, historically contingent. They take on different meanings in different contexts, depending on who uses them and for what purpose. And here I'm going to give you, some, or share with you, my own sense of identity. I was born in Alexandria, Egypt on August 8, 1941. This coming August 8th, I will be 83 years of age. As I grew up in monarchical Egypt before the 1952 army coup, which was transformed into a social revolution. We refer to that event as the July Revolution, whether other people like it or not. It was a revolution. It was not the kind of uprising that we saw in January of 2011. No. We had a government that had a program, that had clarity about who we are as Egyptians, as Arabs, as Africans, and as people who are part of the Nine Aligned Movement, as people who are supporters of movements of national liberation throughout our continent, right? A program that inspired people like Hugo Chavez, that inspired, Castro, not Castro, Che Guevara, as he told Nasser when they met in Cairo. Okay? That's what we had. You don't want to call it a revolution, this is an army coup, you can call it what we want. But for the people of Egypt, till today, the older people who can still remember, God is up there and Nasser is the one on earth. Let's not forget that. And I will tell you one other thing. In the 80s, when I was teaching at the American University in Cairo, I was responsible for graduate students in the department. And there was this graduate student from what had already become Zimbabwe. Okay? And he was telling me how he came to Egypt. He came to Egypt because Nasser had established different radio stations that, broadcast to the different movements of national liberation throughout our African continent, right? And then I told him, so Rhodesia no longer exists, and so what are you still doing here? And he said, Egyptian bureaucracy has a life of its own. Just keeps growing, keeps going. It's like, this guy of the batteries with the batteries. So, a few days before my 10th birthday, I was visiting my aunt in a district of Alexandria called Miami, of all things, okay? And at the time, the Alexandria was a municipality and had very strict rules about the height of buildings. So the first row of buildings which overlooked the sea, the Corniche, okay, were low. My aunt resided in the second row. And so from her upstairs apartment, I could see the Egyptian army tanks going to force the king to abdicate. But the way it was done, they didn't kill him, they didn't lynch him, they let him out in a very, very dignified way. Of course, my parents were elated, especially my father. Okay. Now, in monarchical Egypt, I was, okay, all right. Okay, I'll go very quickly. I was exposed to both positive and negative stereotypes. But guess what? The positive stereotypes were linked to the West. In my school, I was in a British school, and then, my parents thought that they were doing me a great service. I put to be there, okay? The thing that impressed us, they said this is a good school because it has good education. Why is it good education? Because, the curriculum was made in Oxford or wherever it was made, okay? And that is the kind of history of my country, or even the language of my country, was something that was totally alien to me, to the point that we were not allowed to speak Arabic in school. If anyone is heard speaking Arabic, she would have to write 100 lines or more saying, I must not speak Arabic in school. Okay. This, I didn't discover how horrible this curriculum was. I was very proud of myself. I would get up very early in the morning to memorize the soliloquies from Shakespeare. Fortunately, I don't remember a single one of them. Okay, and and it was great. It was lovely. We had French lessons. We had Latin. I loved Latin. Great, very nice. Then came 1952, then where we had a real concerted effort at decolonization of the South. I discovered, actually, that Abyssinia and Aboris were Arab people. And I later learned that the canon of Abyssinia was used in European medical schools until the 14th century. So, nationalization of education. Finally, I got to know something about the history of the Arab world, the history of Africa, and my perception of the African continent, which had developed from watching Tarzan movies. Okay? And guess who I always sided with? Tarzan, of course, the hero. Okay? But with this nationalization and the exposure to a different kind of history, which was well hidden from us, I also discovered that the Mau Mau, were a movement of national liberation, not a den of terrorists. So there were all these revelations that came to be, and the first passport that I got had the following statement written in it: valid for all countries except South Africa. No mention of Israel because Egypt had not recognized this colonial entity. So, okay, all right. My time is finished, but this can. I have more to say, but maybe during the discussion I can share with you some other. Is it all right if I read through George's?
Sure.
Okay. No, I like,
Share a poem with you.
Excuse me, could we open the panel with Drew Jordan's poem?
Oh, shall we keep it in the end?
Yeah, no, not to the end, but just start the panel with the poem.
Okay,
Just
wanna
go
show
with
the
the
movie
film.
now then?
We go with the film now.
Okay.
and the-
All right, we'll go with the film and then you'll read your poem.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Morsi. That's really provides more. I'm just enjoying listening to that. Really how that gives context to my own experiences, and I'm sure your others as well. And just being conscious and challenging a lot of this nonsense that's fed to us. I think this film kind of touches a lot on what Dr. Morsi was covering in this context of taking and assuming identities that are imposed on you. And like I said, the director and writer and actor in this film, Vishwas, was unable to join us, but I'm in it too, and I'm not showing this because I'm in it. I think it was just one of the few roles that I was happy to take, in that it took the stereotype and flipped it on its head and presented it in a very different way to kind of expose the absurdity of the stereotype. So this is a 9-minute movie. There's a tiny bit of profanity, just to give you a warning for those of you who are sensitive to that. But I'll let you interpret it the way you like, and then we'll open up the panel and with my mother's poem and any thoughts or questions you may have. I'm going to move this out of the way so we can walk the screen. I'll turn this off, right? Or, yeah, where's the sound coming from? Should I turn this off?
Yeah.
What? Okay. Super noise. Everybody see well?
Yes.
Enjoy the film.
The hell, man? What the fuck? What? What are you saying? Who the fuck are you? What are you saying? Hey! Stop it! Somebody help me! Help me! Stop! I don't know what you're saying! Help me!
Yo, please. You'll only make it worse. I'm supposed to speak to the gentleman.
Thank you. Please tell me.
Just because I speak English doesn't mean I'm going to be nice to you, okay? So as my friend was asking, where did you get your training and what is your plan?
Plan? What plan? What are you talking about?
Just come clean.
I come clean. You come clean. You are the guy. You guys broke into my apartment. You come clean.
Let's go step by step, huh? Where were you earlier today?
DC. I was driving back from DC all day. The DC.
What did you go to DC for?
Just to visit the monuments, museums. That's what people go to DC for.
So a reconnaissance trip, then.
What?
Identifying targets for your biggest.
No. What are you talking about? Are you crazy?
We ask the questions and just give the answers, Tom. So, as I was saying, what is the next phase for your plan? You let us in on it, we may go easy on you.
Guys. You have it all wrong. Hey, can you stop him? Can you please stop him? I have no idea what he's talking about, and on top of that, he keeps hitting me.
Control him. You do. You answer our questions, we won't have to hit you. Deal?
Okay.
Okay. So, are you part of a group or are you a lone wolf?
For the love of God. I don't know what you're talking about. I am not a terrorist. I need a lawyer.
Our sources tell us otherwise.
Sources? You have sources dedicated to me. They must be making stuff up. You know, because I am as nice and as boring as they come.
We've been informed that you terrorized some Americans at a convenience store earlier tonight.
What?
It's pretty fascinating stuff in my world. No. But the exact opposite of boring, if you will.
Is that what this is all about? That's what this is all about. Oh. You know what? I am done with this crap. This is bullshit. I didn't do anything wrong. Call the cops. I will tell them everything. I did not do anything wrong.
We'll be the judge of that.
You. Who are you? The Godfather? The Captain America and Aladdin over here? Wait. Are you guys cops?
I'm Captain America, and this is my friend Aladdin. Now, we have reason to believe you're a threat to this nation and its people. We have witnesses to testify that you terrorized.
No, sir, no. This is absurd. This is absurd. I was the one who was terrorized. I had to act quickly, and I just did the very first thing that came to my mind.
Go on.
Okay, this is what happened. Right? I was driving back home. I got thirsty, so I decided to stop at a convenience store. It was dark in the parking lot, and I hardly pulled my car when this other car pulls up, and out come these three guys, and they start yelling at me from all sides.
Yo, get the fuck out of the car, you fucking bus.
What the fuck are you
Get
doing?
the fuck over here.
Who the fuck you think you are? I had no idea what they were talking about. I don't know how to respond, but they were really mad. They were really, really mad. I don't know if they were just, drunk, or if they were high, or if they were just boys being boys, but they were really mad. But they had it all wrong. They were clearly mistaking me to be someone else, and I was scared. I was really, really scared. But you know what? I decided to get out of my car and try to calm them down. And that's when I noticed. Once they saw me, they hesitated a little. And I started wondering, would they have had the balls to attack me like that if I were a little bit more menacing, a little bit more intimidating than I actually am? And that's when I started talking to them, even without thinking, words, accents, everything. Don't even think about it, you fucking fuck! You don't want to mess with me. You have no idea what people like me can do. Do you watch the news? We can cause a lot of damage. A lot. Get back in the fucking car and get the fuck out of here. Yo, get the fuck out of the car. What the fuck are you doing? Why are you doing? Shut the fuck up, you piece of shit, ass boy. Fucking A. Fuck you. Yes. Fuck you. You get the fuck out of here. Shut the fuck up.
Wow. You tell a nice story. So, you are a pretend terrorist.
No. For the last time, no. I am not a terrorist. I'm a regular guy who was caught in a bad situation.
Well, technically, you're still in a bad situation. Worse, if you ask me.
Look, if you guys are cops, and if you haven't done already, go ahead and run my background check. Look, I'm not even from that part of the world. Come on, believe me.
So why did you use that accent?
What?
Scare the boys. Why did you choose to be from that part of the world?
I just did the first thing that came to mind.
Why is that?
I had to be convincing.
I don't get it.
Look, like I said, once they saw me, they hesitated a bit. Okay, so clearly they had made some assumptions. And at that point, I had to follow through with something convincing. I couldn't just open my mouth and sound like I was going to offer to fix their computers.
So, told yourself I'll be Arab. Because all Arabs are terrorists and violent and scary, right?
No, please, no. Definitely not. am not a racist. Look at me, I'm on the receiving end myself. I go to crowded places and people look at me funny. I get randomly selected at airports for security checks, special security checks. I can't even tell you how many times I get terrorist jokes from my friends and coworkers. And for once, for once, I used my appearance to my advantage to get out of a sticky situation. I am really, really sorry if what I did hurt your feelings. I can only imagine what it is to be like.
No. You can't imagine. Shut the fuck up. If you ever try to pull this off again, we'll personally shoot you. You understand? Okay, I think I want to show you if we're done. You okay? No. He called you Aladdin. Of course he did. You're Captain America in my book.
Yeah. When I watch it,
I know.
wait a minute. No, you see things. I don't know if you want to use a mic or everybody can hear me. Anybody have any thoughts on questions about the book? Like I said, there's a display copy available and copies for purchase. Feel free just to peruse it. Don't feel obligated to buy it. Just enjoy it, have a look. And also the website of the book is EgyptianWanderer.com. I have quite a few blogs that kind of get a lot more than I said today. Believe it or not, we're a talkative family, I know, but a lot of blogs on the background and even some of the photographers that inspired me. Special references and all that. So please check out the blog section of Egyptian Wanderers. A lot of the images there too. Like I said, have a look at the book as well. Yes.
So I know you transitioning from being a lawyer to an artist.
Yeah.
That's just, I think, very brave and probably a remarkable thing to do. Can you talk a little bit about like what happened, like not what happened, but what was the crucial like catalyst for you to make that change and like step into that new chapter?
Sure. I think that's a good question. I get that a lot, and it's like, oh wow, that's such a crazy, brave thing to do. I think it goes back to what I was reading about in the essay on creativity. What kind of my parents, my family, my second grade teacher, kind of. It's not one thing. It's you can. I don't know.
You've got a loud enough voice.
Yeah, I think so.
Loud enough
Oh,
voice.
wait, there we go.
Hello?
Wow, that's so much. Just really having multiple interests. And, my parents fostered that in us all the time. I remember when my mother was doing her field work in Egypt while I was in 5th grade. And my father got us on a program and said, okay, what book are you reading this week? What are your recreational activities? What are you going to do for fun? What are you going to do? And really just inspiring us to broaden our horizons. It's not just one thing. And I love mentoring young adults or even high school students to share that with them, that there's no limit. There's no, I decided to study architecture. That's it. I'm done for life. No, and that's it. No, you always have the chance to explore new things and have different interests. Again, I'm not going to get on my soapbox, but really consumerism and hyper-capitalism is what really narrows these things. My nephew, Ziad, just shared a book with me called The Flattening. What was the name of the book? The Flattening. The essential idea is the flattening of culture. How, through social media, our preferences are kind of categorized, and that's all we're getting exposed to through social media. Like, oh, well, you like this. Like, wait, maybe I like Chinese literature, and you don't know about it yet. And how that's flattening culture as a whole, that it's just really narrowing down and kind of flipping it on its head and really going out. So for me, to answer your question, that's conceptually, but specifically too, I always had a love for arts. I put on the play Wizard of Oz in 3rd grade. A lot of things I did, that's the thing, going to college. What's your major? Okay, I started out in engineering. Wait, after your first year, what's your specialization? Like, I don't know. I went to the bookstore and looked at the engineering books to figure it out. And the only one that made sense to me was chemical, because it's like this goes in and splits off here, and no other courses other than a token humanities class and a token economics class. I mean, more and more curricula are expanding. Like, why can't I learn to be a business person and an engineer at the same time? Like, to design the thing and run it efficiently. Oh, wow, that doesn't fit the kind of compartmentalization. And I think you just look at education generally in the United States, where it is very compartmentalized. It's not the broader learning how to learn. I mean, do I remember what I studied in sophomore year in thermodynamics class? Of course not. So what was the point of that? It's learning how to learn. So for me, it's kind of flows, and it's not easy. Okay, it's not easy to. I'm not being simplistic. Some people don't have the means to do it. I worked hard. I helped rich people get richer. Unfortunately, as a lawyer, I wanted to be a human rights lawyer. I did my own volunteer work, but when I could afford to pursue something like this, I did. So not so much bravery. I know people that are really limited means that are struggling to do their art. So I worked hard, I paid off my debt and did it. So it wasn't super brave, but it's fun and I love it. And I think going back to community, that's what you should do.
You're ignoring your mother.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I have no choice.
I just want to express my appreciation of the state of Michigan at the time when our children were growing up. When we came to this country, I mean, we had political problems in Egypt, and actually we essentially escaped to come back to the United States, okay, to democracy. And at the time, my husband
I
had.
didn't come to democracy.
Okay. No,
I came to science. Your
original coming here was for science, okay, but the second time we came back here before the 67 war was because of your father was a political prisoner, you were blacklisted.
I'll get in the car.
Okay. So when Ashraf had more than one offer, right, to be on chemistry faculty in different universities, and the basis for choosing one was the system of education in the state where we would eventually reside. And at the time, the school system in the state of Michigan was superb. And I think we have three children who can speak to that. In particular, our older children, okay, because they were there in the heyday of the good education in Michigan. And with Mona, it kept going down, down, and down, caught the tape. But this was very important. And in Michigan, we were also part of community, as Amr keeps saying. It was a university community which, with global perspectives. We were at Michigan State, okay, in the 60s, the civil rights movement, the effects of the civil rights movement at that time related to feminism, okay, related to anti-war movement, related to different kinds of solidarities were central to our life on a daily basis, right? Michigan State, and so Gigi can talk to that, but after I just add one more point, not forget that Michigan State University was the first major university in the United States to divest from South Africa. You know, we were all part of that. We were part of that, and the kids would come along and so on. So this commitment to something beyond getting a career and so on didn't come out of thick air, and not just because Amr had nice parents.
Can I just say, I don't know if people realize this, when Nelson Mandela was released from prison, the first country he visited was Egypt. And the reason he visited Egypt was because he wanted to pay his respects to Gamal Abdel Nasser, who had died by that time. Because Gamal Abdel Nasser had provided training grounds, not just for the ANC, but had a patient from Papua New Guinea who's Gamal Abdel Nasser provided training grounds there. So this idea of African liberation is very important. I'm just going to say one thing.
Sure.
Keep the mic closer.
Sorry, I'm going to say one thing. This idea of the separation of art from anything else is, I think, perhaps more Western, because in Egypt, for example, and other countries, this separation doesn't exist. My father is a writer, he's a scientist, he's an artist, so this is kind of an artificial construct. So if you look at some of the writers, like Chekhov, for example, he's a physician. So these are artificial. I don't think those are, we're all artists, as my sister always says. We are all artists, we are all creatives. Oh,
Okay, thanks, Gigi. Anybody else?
Did I have, yeah.
Trump
Please.
is a good shit.
Do you have a-
Yeah, but-
Gigi, can you pass the microphone back to this lady over here?
Trump is a bullshitter.
Gigi, I would first of all love the fact that you made that point that the division of career and everybody's identity is very Western. I feel like everybody's put in a box here, especially with capitalism and everything. And just the way that we live our lives in America is where you have a role, you can't, explore other interests because you actually don't have time for that. So that's very insightful. And I have a question for both of you guys up there. Since I know you wrote a paper from when it comes to you range from science to the civil rights movement, and then you range from obviously being a lawyer to now being an artist. And you said something about verbatim, it's about learning how to learn. And I remember in school one day, we had a conversation, and it was like, have you realized you were never taught how to breathe? We just breathe, but we were never actually taught how to breathe. So just, I would just like to get your perspective on how do you think people should learn and how people should go about just the act of learning, pursuing learning, and if you have any advice about just how to learn.
Sure, that's a great question. I think it goes back to community. I think it goes to getting out of the standard forms that we're kind of bombarded with now. I think social media is excessive. I think it limits people's ability. Going to an event like this, going to a bookstore, going and dealing with people, going and volunteering, going to Martha's Kitchen, interacting with people on a daily basis, being a part of your community. That's learning, that's living, and you'll keep doing it until you pass away, hopefully after 100 years. That's it. It's an ongoing process. There's no end point to it. It is experiencing, it is being generous, it is being curious. It's all of these things that should never end. So I can put it in that sense as broadly as possible. Maya, I don't want this on. Shireen, sorry. Sure. Sure, my niece is going to add to that too.
I'm going to be a little bit controversial and disagree a bit because I maybe that's a generational idea of compartmentalization, but I know my university experience was quite diverse and interdisciplinary, and we had many opportunities to engage in multitude of different activities and kind of just diversity of different experiences. So I would say, my university experience was allowed you to choose to engage in many things simultaneously, and I think that's been preserved in a lot of current curriculum.
Well, excellent. I don't think that's controversial at all, Shireen. I think you were lucky. I think maybe because I specialized early, where if I were to go back, I would pick a much broader language, science, and the arts.
Maybe
I picked engineering.
Maybe that's why she failed and became a lawyer.
Yeah. Okay. Mommy, any thoughts?
I think sometimes we find ourselves on situations which impose on us a responsibility to act in a certain way. Okay? And I, go back to when we were in Tallahassee, Florida. Okay? We happened to be in Tallahassee, Florida, and experience what segregation was. But we were also there at a time when the civil rights movement was creeping towards Tallahassee. And it was a time when we were refused service at Woolworth, right? Before that, we were in a quote, white university. We were at Florida State. We were not at Florida A&M. Okay? And, I had no idea what that meant, or, you are white and you are colored and all that. This just didn't make, I didn't even bother to know. So when you find yourself in a situation where you start by feeling, okay, these people look to me, in a nasty way and so on, and they're trying to figure me out and so on. But then you find yourself in a situation where you are refused, and then it hits you. Why am I being refused service? And so you start to identify with other people who are also being, refused service. Now, the same thing when I was, as an undergraduate, I majored in bacteriology with a chemistry minor. For years, I worked in research, with my longer term job was with a very famous German scientist who was, did wonderful research on
Can you put the mic closer?
Yeah.
Because we can't hear you.
Yeah, okay. And then something happened. When we, people of my generation, refer to ourselves in Egypt as the generation of the defeat. That was the defeat of 1967, right? And so after that, there was, in the United States, there was the formation of something called the Arab American University Graduates, where when we met, we found that many of us had been, majored in the sciences. And at the same time, we were confronting a reality about our society which our science didn't help us understand. So many of us actually started to gravitate towards the social sciences. And that's when I decided to become an anthropologist. Fortunately for me, it was a time when when there was this new discipline called medical anthropology, so I fitted comfortably with that. But before that, I really benefited not so much from the anthropology, although, when you study anthropology, you realize what it is as a handmaiden of imperialism. You see the societies which anthropologists have studied and how they have presented us, and all that. So, yeah, you do the history of the world that you live in, it also guides you to certain interests and certain specialization. So it's not just something that you wake up in the morning and say, that's not what I'm going to do.
I think we're trying to be as broad as possible, but really, I don't think I think it's the experience in going and exploring and exposing yourself as much as possible. Just a quick aside, I couldn't help but remember this story. Was it Woolworth or Howard Johnson's, where my parents went in? This is in around 1956, where the waitress said, "We don't serve no niggers here." My mother said, "First, you must learn to speak your language properly." Anyway, and then on another aside, speaking of books, my father wrote his memoirs in English. It's their experience arriving into Florida from Egypt as young graduate students, called Colored Water, Dixie Through Egyptian Eyes, kind of his own account. The idea of colored water comes from the fountain that was in Tallahassee. It said there was one that was colored and one that didn't say colored, or it said white. And my father said, "Well, I'm going to try the colored." Of course, it was tepid, warm water, but that's available on Amazon as well. Any other questions or thoughts, again, about stereotypes, about what we talked about? Please.
Yeah, so I've just kind of been thinking, thank you. I've just been thinking about kind of holding multiplicity within like your own identity when you're ascribed to different stereotypes, and kind of thinking about the film and thinking about something that you had said earlier about denying, like, when you're Egyptian, sometimes playing into being African and sometimes like denying that part of your identity. So I just kind of wanted to get either of your perspective on like the privilege of being in spaces and contexts where you can play into certain aspects of your identity, and being in other spaces where that's not like a safe thing to do, if that makes sense.
Kind of the idea of the but playing into your identity, is that a privilege? Is that something? For me, I think the best example, and not to talk about myself, this is just really a reference point based on, I love talking about myself, but an experience I had that I think can be on point is my sophomore year in high school. Michigan, American guy, chewing tobacco, blonde girlfriend, dude this, dude that, football, the whole thing. And I find out we're going to Egypt for a sabbatical. I'm like, what is it? No, I've got a girlfriend, I'm working at the ice cream shop, dude. And I went. And even though we went to Egypt growing up regularly, it was a beautiful thing to go see my cousins ever since the age of 3. I was American. And I can't, it's like, okay, you gotta pick a team. You got everybody saying you gotta pick a team. You can't be Muhammad, either you're Mo and you're American, or you're Muhammad and you're a devout Muslim and you're this other end of the spectrum. You make your own definition of who you are in your experience. That experience in Egypt for me was very defining. There's a photo actually in the book that I think is very representative. It's called Hoki in Alexandria. It's the boys at swimming in the Mediterranean, because I went to Egypt that year, and it was the most delightful, transformative year of my life. It was, I started off by saying this is a dirty country, that it was the usual nonsense. And then just, okay, my father kept saying, we'll discuss it, possibly you can go back in Christmas and stay at Mark Zelinsky's. And I had brought these proposals, and my mom finally said, stop telling these proposals. And then Christmas Eve, he said, we're not going, that's final. That's when I just, and back to what you were saying, how do you connect with women? Just go out and just do it. Do not worry about what's next, or I want to go back here, it's going to be better there. You're here and now. And I hate the cliche, because you hear it all the time in acting, but being present and being, this is it now. It's not what's next or what does this lead to. Sometimes it doesn't lead to anything. It's an experience. So that sort of stuff to answer your point. And then I didn't want to come back. And I didn't say, oh, I hate America. Oh, I didn't go 180. But I came back to East Lansing, Michigan, feeling much broader. You're like, oh, we were in Egypt. That was cool. And I've got something else here. And that's part of me. And other people may have other things, but suppressing those things is what I think is dangerous. And being you and enjoying being you. I mean, we're so pushed to be conformist in what we wear. Like, if there's a new fad, tattoo, we all have to get that. Even the rebellion becomes standardized. You know what I mean? Like, what if someone put a banana in there? You're just do something unique. But my point is, that's the beauty of it. And as an artist or whatever you do, but particularly when I see it acting, when I teach acting, I used to teach at George Mason.